Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 36 of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast, powered by MK Battery. We're now over a week away from the start of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership, and that means one thing: the prediction episode. This is one of our favourite traditions on the podcast, where we try to forecast how the campaign might unfold, who will shine, who will surprise, and who will be standing tall when we get to the end of Gameweek 5. My name is Ryan Sipple, and I am delighted to be joined by two of the brightest young prospects in the country, both of whom are competing in the Championship this season. David D from Manchester United and Jay Pickston from Manchester City. Gents, it's great to have you on. I know you've been following the off-season moves closely, and it'll be great to get your perspectives from players who are right in the thick of it themselves in their own division. Are we both excited for the start of the Premiership?
Can't wait, to be honest. Should be really competitive this season. I think there's a couple of surprise packages, to be honest. But I think hopefully the new signings will make a big difference.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this season. I think we're blessed to have one of the best Powerchair football leagues in the world, and I think it's just a very entertaining watch.
Yeah, I always say that without trying not to be too biased. I truly believe that our National League as a whole is the best in the world, but the Premiership is the absolute pinnacle. I have no doubt you two have very strong aspirations of one day competing within it. Let me get your assessments quickly on Gameweek 1 of the Championship. Starting with you, David. How did you feel you fared with Manchester United, your first weekend competing with them?
I thought we fared as we were expected to do almost. I thought some of our results were really, really solid. Beating City 1-0, our draw against Leeds, and our 2 wins against Hull and GBG Saracens. Although the one against GBG Saracens, we thought we could have done a bit better, but we'll take the 3 points either way. With regards to the game that we lost against Villa, we definitely felt that we could have done better in some areas, because both of our goals came from mistakes. But I think it's just eliminating those mistakes from our game. And I think just because we're a new squad with 5 new individuals that rarely play with each other, or have rarely played with each other, I think it's just going to take a bit of gelling time, and I can't wait to see what our next game week brings.
Nice, really excited. And yourself, Jay, fighting more towards the bottom of the table, but a lot of positives from Game Week 1.
Yeah, I think we kept every game competitive. We managed to get a point against Teesside Steel, which, when you're looking at they're hoping to be a Premier League team next season, it's very unexpected, but I think we all did ourselves proud every game, maybe 1 or 2 goals. We was a bit disappointed with the loss to Altrincham at the end. They scored in the last few minutes, but we came away with a point against Teesside, so we'll take that.
I'm sure you will. No, great to get your assessments. So back to this episode. Before we dive into the categories, a quick word about our brilliant partners who make all of this possible. First up, our MK Battery. Their support absolutely everywhere in Powerchair football. They power clubs at grassroots level. They support the international game. And of course, they make this very podcast possible. They're also the official streaming partner of the WFA for 25-26. So every time you tune into the National League, the commentary, the graphics, the production, it's all fueled by MK Battery. And alongside them, our new title sponsor for the National League, Slater and Gordon. This is the first full season of the Slater and Gordon National League, and their backing has already been transformative, from naming the WFA as their 2024 Charity of the Year to supporting the Benevolent Fund They have shown that they're so invested in this sport, far beyond just the branding. So a big thank you to MK Battery and Slater and Gordon. Right then, let's get into it. All but a few deviations from our championship predictions that I did a couple of weeks ago. We'll be going through all the major categories, starting with team to watch, player to watch, signing of the season, young player of the season, top assists, top goal scorer, player of the season, and then our predicted runners up and champions. And then dependent on time, we may go through our 1st through 12th tables. David and Jay, I deliberately asked you not to discuss picks with one another, so hopefully we can properly dissect each other's predictions in more detail. And just finally, before we get into it, I just want to put this out there, because these kinds of episodes always spark a bit of debate. You'll always get people saying, how could you pick that team? Or why didn't you mention this player? And that's almost half the fun of it. So let's just make it clear from the start. These are our opinions, nothing more. In the grand scheme of things, they don't mean a great deal. If we didn't mention you, go and prove us wrong. If we did mention you, go and prove us right. It's all just a bit of fun, a way to celebrate what's coming and build a bit of excitement for the season ahead. The season which kickstarts on October 25th at the Lee Westwood Sports Centre. So to begin, let's go with team to watch. This is a category for anyone new to these types of episodes. It isn't necessarily about who we think is going to win the league. It's more about intrigue. So maybe it's someone who's made a few changes, or they've had a coaching switch up. They've got players stepping up a level, but it's the team you're most curious about. So Jay, let's start with yourself. What team are you excited to see this season? And please give me your rationale behind that.
I've gone for Greenbank, and I think it's the second season now in the Premier League, so the experience of the younger players like Jacob Platt will be there. Obviously they've brought in Marcus Harrison, Toby and Croft, so the experience and the quality is there. I think that they will be pushing up the table quite high this season. And I just think that they're such a solid team, and obviously it helps when you have someone such as with the talent of Marcus Harrison. So I'm really excited to watch them this season, and I think Jacob Platt is going to have a massive breakthrough season, and he's really going to show us the quality and the levels he can reach in his career.
Great pick. David, who have you opted for?
I've gone for Newcastle United Foundation PFC. A lot of people might think it's a bit of an odd decision, considering they've lost one of their key players in Ethan Fisher. However, I think Ollie Crawshaw will be able to step up into this main role and figure that we know York can be, and show and prove why he deserves to be the main man, the centre of attention in that squad. I also think the signings of Sam McKee, Matty Harrison and Lee Armstrong will really prove to aid Newcastle in the league this season. And hopefully, although they've had quite a few losses, they could in players, hopefully they can come back and prove everyone wrong and show why they are still a strong contending team in the league.
Both fantastic picks. Both I will elaborate on as we get into this episode. But just for my pick, I have opted very similarly to Jay and chosen Greenbank. And I'm really intrigued by them this year. I think a lot of people might overlook what they achieved last season because they weren't overly flashy. They didn't make big statements or headline results necessarily, but in their first Premiership campaign, they quietly did a really solid job. I think they finished 7th with 28 points, never really in danger. And that's really exactly what you want in your debut. What's exciting now is they've kept that core together. I think the return, as Jay alluded to briefly, of Torbjorn Kraup will prove to be a brilliant bit of business come season's end. If you watch the recent F Nations Cup, you'll know what I mean. He was absolutely sensational for Denmark. He ran games from the centre, he dictated the tempo and looked like a player at the absolute top of his powers. If he brings even half of that form into the Premiership, Greenbank instantly become a very different proposition. I don't really need to elaborate a great deal on Marcus Harrison. We know he's one of the best players this country has ever produced. And it was his signing last season which raised everyone's expectations massively. And I'll be honest, when he signed, I thought they might even push higher than they did. But I actually think the first season together will help them this time around. The foundations are completely there. It's been said, Jacob Buchplaat, like Jay, this is his year. I have no question about it. Last season was a learning curve, flashes of real quality, some inconsistency, but you could see the growth every time he played. He's had that exposure to the Premiership and the England pathway now, so he's matured. And I think this will be the season where he properly announces himself as one of the league's top young talents. So a really exciting mix, and I'm fascinated to see how they fare. I think a lot of their form last season coincided with Luke Kelly's absence or availability. So I'd like to see him feature more regularly, because when he plays, they look more structured. His leadership, his calmness gives them a bit more control. But game week 1, they play West Brom and Leeds. So 2 massive tests. If they come through those with positive results, there's no telling what they can achieve in the division. So it's a great way to start. Next category, we have player to watch. And this is about players who could really take a step forward this season, the ones ready to shoulder more responsibility, grow into a bigger role and potentially become the difference makers. You may opt for a well-known name, an established player, or someone primed for their breakthrough season. So David, I'll come to you first on this one. Who's the player you're most excited to keep an eye on this season?
I've gone for a bit of an interesting one here again that I don't think many people are going to expect. I've gone for Oscar Smedley. Multiple reasons why. Although it's his first season in the Premiership, and he's only had one season prior being in the National League, I feel the moments that I saw of him, obviously being on the England pathway with him and playing against him in the National League, he is 100% got the quality to be able to make a difference in these games for GBG United, because GBG United's game from the very beginning is to stay up, because they need that security, they need that stability to be able to say, yes, we are a Premiership club now. And I think that Oscar Smedley, he's got it really on his locker. He can play in the middle, he can defend, he can assist, he can score, and that's what you need when you're a Premiership side fighting for survival, because you need to get your goals. You need to be able to defend well against the big clubs, and I think he'll be able to provide a great foothold for GBG United.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic pick. I mean, what he did in his debut National League campaign for GBG United last season was remarkable, finishing top of the assist charts. He got several goals and guided them to promotion. So it's just how that translates to the Premiership, that inexperience, but there's no question that there's a serious player in there. So great pick. Who have you opted for, Jay?
I thought there was multiple people you could pick for this one, so I just put down a few honourable mentions, and very similar to David. Oscar Smedley, I don't think you can look past him. Unbelievable player. I think he's only going to improve with playing against the players that are in the Premier League, gaining that experience. I think he'll do really well this season. And then similar to David's first pick of the first category, I've gone for Ollie Crawshaw. I think now that the spotlight, you might say, has been taken away from Ethan Fisher at Newcastle, I think it's his opportunity to step up into that role, and we know the talent that he's got, and we know how good of a player he is, and I think he can now prove that to the levels that he is possibly going to be their main outlet in that Newcastle team. And I think I'm really excited to see him provide Newcastle with that attacking momentum that they're going to need this season.
I just want to emphasise that we haven't conferred on our predictions or picks prior to this episode being recorded. So apologies in advance if there's any duplications of answers. But exactly the same as Team to Watch, my pick is Ollie Crawshaw as well. And for the points that Jay has just discussed, Newcastle have had to evolve this summer. Losing players like Ethan Fisher and Sam Smith change everything. It reshapes their entire structure. And we've spoken about Matty Harrison and Sam Mackay coming in to complement that front line, which gives them good variety. It gives them good freshness going forward. But for me, it's Ollie Crawshaw who becomes the absolute key. He's now the heartbeat of that team, the one who will dictate tempo, he will set the rhythm, he will connect every phase of play. And he is such an intelligent football player that I think this is the season where we see him really step up and take command of Newcastle centre. What's exciting about Ollie is how complete his game is becoming. He's got the technical quality to break the lines, the versatility to play in any position. And despite his age, he has the maturity to lead others when things get tough. So you can tell he's growing into that responsibility. And I think the trust that Jamie Harrison and the team will place in him this year will really bring out the best in him. He's a great player, isn't he?
Unbelievable player, especially for his age as well. Such a young player and playing to the levels that he is. I think it'll be really exciting to see him this season getting there.
100% as well. I had him on my honourable mentions list for this player to watch, for the player to watch segment as well. Just thought I think he might pop up a bit later in a different segment, but I think he could be a very, very, very crucial player for Newcastle this season.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And he's one of many players that are currently within the England development squad, knocking on that door to get the call to senior level. And he's not far off. If he can have a fantastic season composing the centre for Newcastle, I think Buenos Aires being the 2026 World Cup will probably be too soon. But beyond that, there's no reason why he can't force his way into the conversation. But your pick, David, as well, of Oscar Smedley is a fantastic one. There's so many great players in this division, and I went over several to land on one. And I'm sure across this episode I'll include some honourable mentions. But when I thought about a breakthrough season for a player hitting new heights, I only landed on Ollie Crawshaw. I think he'll be that important to Newcastle's success. So next up, we have signing of the season. Now, this is always one of my favourite categories because it's not necessarily about the biggest names or the high-profile moves. It's about impact. Who comes in and changes the dynamic and the success of their team. Jay, I'll come to you first this time. When you look across the Premiership, who do you think has made the signing that will make the biggest difference this year?
I think when you're looking at the transfer window, you're instantly drawn, or at least I was, to Leeds. I think in one transfer window signing Ethan Fisher and Dylan Kelso it's unbelievable transfers. I think they're both England international players, some of the best players in the league. So combining that with the Dan Rigby's, Jack Maxwell, Lewis Harris, I think that team is going to be right up there. So I think I've had Dylan Kelso. I believe that he'll be challenging for that top goal scorer and other things like that, other accolades like that come at the end of the season. So I think that he'll do really well. But I also put Henry Barnard down from Muscle Warriors, and I don't necessarily think that Muscle Warriors are going to exceed, and I don't think they might have the greatest of seasons, but I think him having that season in the Premiership last season with Norwich, getting the experience, getting over the nerves, combining that with playing alongside someone such as Rickenshaw, I think he'll excel this season and really play to some very high levels considering his age.
A fantastic pick and a really nice honourable mention as well. David, same question. Who's your pick?
I think I'm gonna have to go with the same one here with Jay. It's got to be Dylan Kelso. The way he plays, I could just see him slotting right into that Leeds team, being the commander. I mean, he's been chosen to be the captain of Leeds this year, and I think him combining with obviously Ethan Fisher, a fellow England player, Lewis Harris, and Dan Rigby could be a absolutely formidable team. However, I would like to give an honourable mention to George Shippey, having had an incredible season in the 24-25 championship. He has proven himself that he can do it and win the league in a very important role. And I think if he brings those skills to Sevenoaks this season, he could really add and maybe partially fill the void, because it's a very big void that Harry Bestwick's left, but possibly even fully fill the void that Harry Bestwick's left at Sevenoaks this season.
Yeah, fantastic pick. I'll give my answers. I'll start by saying I've deliberately not gone for the two obvious ones. So Dylan Kelso and Ethan Fisher, because if we're being honest, they're easy picks. Both are England internationals, both are world-class talents, and both will have a huge influence on Leeds' season. I think they'll have a massive impact, maybe the biggest overall. But to mix things up, I've looked to give credit and acknowledgement elsewhere. So I've purposefully left them out of my thought process here. And for that, my signing of the season is Sam Mackay, returning to Newcastle United Foundation. Now, this is a fascinating one. Sam's barely played competitive football for the last 12 to 18 months. In fact, I had to really think hard about when his last National League appearance was, and I'm pretty sure it was back in the 23-24 championship season with Middlesbrough, because I don't think he featured at all last year, and that's a long spell to be out the game. And to come back in at Premiership level, there is very few hiding places. That said, I saw him a couple of months ago at an RETP session in Leeds, and I thought he was incredible. Jay, you were there that day, so I'll come to you in a second. And I'm sure you'll agree, after that much time away, you'd expect a little bit of rust, maybe some hesitancy, a lack of confidence, but there was none of that. He looked calm, composed, and completely assured. His positional awareness, his time, his decision-making, it was all there. And it felt like he'd never been away. And that's why this move to Newcastle excites me so much, because if he can translate what we saw that day into competitive matches, then Newcastle have picked up a really smart bit of business. With Ethan Fisher and Sam Smith moving on, Newcastle were always going to need to rebuild, and I believe Sam will play a big part in that next chapter for them. Now, as far as I'm aware, Sam probably won't feature across all 5 weekends. I don't think he's fully available for the entire season. I'm not 100% sure if he'll be there for Gameweek One, but even so, if and when he is on the court and does feature, I think he's going to surprise a lot of people. Give me your assessments on that, Jay, because you was there that same day. It was impressive.
Yeah, I didn't actually know of his story, so I didn't know how long he'd been out of the game for until the end of the day when I was speaking to his dad. And you wouldn't have been able to tell from watching him. His positioning was there, his striking of the ball was there, everything was perfect. He was an unbelievable player. You could really tell that, well, you would have assumed that he was a Premier League player for Middlesbrough that season, but to be out of the game for that long, to not have you'd expect rust, or you might expect a few, like you said, a bit of hesitancy, but there was none of that. He was absolutely incredible on that day at Leeds. So I think it'll be really exciting to see him in this Newcastle squad compete at the highest level.
Yeah, I just hope he gets back to full fitness and shows what he's got, because he's always been regarded as a very good talent. It's just putting that to practice. Just going back to my point, I'll give a few honourable mentions. If we were including re-signings, then Torbjorn Kraup at Greenbank would be very high on my list. Getting him back in that squad, I think, will be absolutely huge. You could see his performances for Denmark at the Euros. The way he controlled games, pushed them to World Cup qualification, was outstanding. And a quick mention, very similar to yourself, Jay, Henry Barnard moving to Muscle Warriors. Things never quite clicked for him at Norwich last season in the Premiership, but this feels like a really good fit, irrelevant of how Muscle Warriors perform, if they stay up or they don't. I think he's surrounded by experienced players and solid coaching, and that's an environment that will allow him to rebuild confidence and rediscover his best form. So some great picks overall. Right, now we move on to one of my favourite categories, Young Player of the Season. This one always feels special because it's about the next generation, the players who aren't just breaking into National League football, but who are really starting to influence it. I tipped both of you to be in contention for this exact same award in the Championship, so I'm intrigued to see where you've landed on your pick in the Premiership. Just for context, to qualify, players have to be 18 or under at the start of the season, which this year means anyone born after, I think, the 25th of October 2006. And when you actually look at the list, I think there's around 15 to 18 players across the Premiership. It's fantastic for the sport, and a real credit to all the clubs who are building those pathways and giving young players proper opportunities at this level. Now, more often than not, the award ends up going to someone in a team competing near the top of the table. You only have to look as far back as Mitch Tinkler last season, phenomenal in helping Teesside to their first ever Premiership title. And it shows that young players tend to flourish when they're surrounded by structure, consistency, and a bit of experience. So, David, I'll start with you. Who is your pick for Young Player of the Season?
I'll tell you, this was really tough, this decision, Ryan. I've been toying with these 2 or 3 players for like the whole day, and I just cannot decide. But I'm gonna go with Ollie Crawshaw. And I think Ollie Crawshaw, we've said it all about him already. He's got a new opportunity to shine, to be the main man, to be the star of the team, to be able to express himself freely in the middle and not feel almost in the shadow of Ethan Fisher. And I think if he performs this season, I'm pretty certain, and I think all 3 of us are pretty certain, that he will not disappoint this season. He would be in very much running for Young Player of the Season due to his just sheer quality in the way he can pass a ball, the way he can dribble a ball, the way he can just drive this team forward to win matches and grind them through. The other players that I was thinking about, obviously you've got the really obvious one in Mitch Tinkler. He obviously was the winner of that award last season, and I think Teesside haven't weakened at all. They've only got stronger, and I believe that when you stay in that stability and the same environment around you, you will flourish again, and he will be shining that new shining young light of Teesside.
Yeah, fantastic picks. What about yourself, Jay?
Like you said earlier, it's normally a player that is competing at the top of the league, but before I get onto it, I would just like to give a mention, as I said earlier, to Jacob Buckplatt. I think, although I have had Greenbank do quite well this season, I don't think they'll be competing near the top of the league. I think the Premier League's got too much quality, but I think he will really impress this season, especially for his age. So I believe he could be in contention for it. However, I don't think you can look past Mitch Tinkler again, in my opinion. I think Teesside is still such a formidable side. Tyler Reeve obviously just been to the England at the Euros. It's only going to give him more confidence, and they've got the momentum of being Premier League champions. So I think he's just going to build on that from last season, and it would not surprise me if he goes on to win it again this season.
He was just sensational last season. The clear winner. I think in years gone by, excluding 24-25, it's been a 2 or 3 horse race, typically between Ollie Crawshaw, Dan McClellan and Mitch Tinkler, always typically going to one of Ollie or Dan. But last season, Mitch was the clear winner, and it was tied up in Teesside's success, and he was fundamental to that success. So I can't really disagree with your picks. I'm sure the same as you have those players that jump off the page. So you've got Mitch Tinkler, Ollie Crawshaw, Jacob Buck-Platt. I want to put Ollie Rock in there, all of whom I think will play important roles within their teams this season. You've got the new names already mentioned, like Oscar Smedley stepping up. It'll be fascinating to see how quickly they adapt to the intensity of the Premiership. But for me, there's one, and that's Dan McClellan from Aspire. Dan's already operating at such a high level that it almost feels unfair to still call him a young player. He's the only current England senior international who qualifies for this award. And with the 2026 World Cup in Argentina fast approaching, he's going to want to be at his absolute peak. And I think we'll see him use that this season as a platform, not just to maintain his standards, but to elevate them even further. Now, it's so easy to forget just how much football Dan's already played for someone his age. He's competed in the World Cup, the European Championships, the Champions Cup, the Club World Cup, excluding what he's done in this country, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And if we go into them European Championships, yes, it didn't go to plan for England collectively, but people should be very careful not to judge players on a single tournament. The reality is Dan is a world-class player. His control, his composure, the way he manipulates tempo, there's no one quite like him in his age bracket, I believe, anywhere worldwide. What makes this season particularly exciting, and the reason I picked him, is the context around him at Aspire, because Rosie Hodgson has moved to Villa. They've brought in Rich George as a new wide option, but Dan's going to have even more responsibility than he's had in the last 2-3 seasons. He's going to need to be the creator, the goal scorer, and the leader all in one. And if there's anyone capable of thriving under that kind of pressure, I believe it's him. So Dan's my pick. But Mitch Tinkler and Ollie Crawshaw, Jacob Buck-Platt as 3 others, I think they are all on the cusp of either the England development squad or senior squad. And they will want to show that they belong at that level and will be in Adam McAvoy's post-Argentina cycle. But for me this year, consistency, maturity and influence, I've opted for Dan McClellan. Give me your assessment, you two, on Dan McClellan as a player.
I think I did have him down, however, I wasn't entirely sure on his age, so I just left that there. But I think it'd be silly to overlook Dan McClellan. The experience he's got at such a young age it's crazy when you think about it. And I think I think Aspire are going to have a bit of a bounce back season this season. I think they're going to be challenging right at the very, very top, which we know they can do. So I'm really excited to see the levels he can get up to this season.
David, Dan's 16 years of age. He's already played in every single competition possible. It's remarkable, isn't it?
I just think it's absolutely bonkers. I mean, as a young player myself, me and Jay both recognise that you have to get a lot of experience, a lot of playing time to be able to develop. But talk about a lot of playing time for Dan McClellan. To be honest, you're saying he's playing for Young Player of the Season. He could honestly be a contender for Player of the Season as well. If he puts up the levels we know he can, and he puts up the numbers we know he can, we can all well and talk say, oh yeah, he can be a good Young Player of the Season, but he can definitely compete for that Player of the Season role.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a statement that I applied to yourself, David, when it comes to the championship, because you're performing at such a high level now that you will be in conversation for the ultimate player of the season, not just the young player of the season. Age isn't a prerequisite for being in consideration for that big award, and Dan is the exact same. So good, so influential. And if he has a good season, Aspire has a good season. It's as simple as that. So really exciting, but take nothing away from the other young players. As we said, I think there's 18 eligible across the Premiership. And there's no reason why any of the aforementioned players can't really go on to confirm this award. Let's now progress on to top assists. Now, this one is one of the categories that's really started to get recognition in the last few years, because it properly highlights creators. Because while goals grab headlines, I think assists tell you everything about a team's structure, the rhythm, the chemistry, the execution. And you can't fluke an assist tally over 5 weekends or 22 league games. It is the product of repetition, of habit, and of a system that really works. And personally, I think this is one of the hardest awards to win. Some might disagree, but for me, maintaining that consistency and precision week after week is even harder than scoring goals. What do you boys think? Is it tougher to be a provider or a finisher consistently?
Speaking from a middleman's perspective, I would much rather get a beautiful assist than a beautiful goal. And I know that sounds really weird, because I think it's more that the assist is about crafting the goal, because most goals come from beautiful works in play and moving the ball around and moving the defenders out of the way and getting a tap in at the back post. And all well, it's good for the guy to be there at the back post to constantly be able to slot it in. But the real art, in my opinion, is to get the ball through and literally knife it right through the two defenders and make it so easy for the striker to score. Yes, you get some really good goals, some individual moments like far out goals and just technically really good goals. But I think you often find more unbelievable assists.
Which one's harder though? That's the question. If you was to top the assists or top the goal scorers, which one would need more effort? Because for me, I just think, to all of your points, it's so much harder to create than to be that poacher on the back post. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I completely agree that the assister is where the difficulty is. I think you only have to go back to the recent FA Nations Cup, I think, or from my opinion anyway, the majority of the goals that we saw came from just front bumper tappings near to the net, and all the power, the accuracy, everything had been generated from the assist. And I think that is the crucial part. That's the hardest part to get right. And if you can get someone that can get that right consistently all the way throughout the season, I think that's the most important thing to getting goals on a team. And I would much rather win top assister and top goal scorer.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And that's why I love that we've brought this in as a proper recognition that comes with an award. Let's start with you, Jay. Who do you think will pick up this achievement come season's end?
I've gone for Dan Rigby. I think Leeds this season are going to be quite the goal scoring threat. I think they're going to rock up that goal tally quite high. And I think Dan Rigby, the power he can get on the ball, the consistency and the accuracy, whether that be from a set ball or just open play, I think he's so consistent, like I said, with every aspect. And I think having the quality of Jack Maxwell, Ethan Fisher, Lewis Harris, and Dylan Kelsall throughout the pitch, I think there's always going to be someone there to get on the end of it. and I think that's just going to make him thrive in that league team this season.
David, who will be the ultimate creator in this division?
We've mentioned him a lot already, and it's the man, Dan McClellan. With the service from John Balding out to the wide winger, you got Rich George or John Dixon on the other wing. He will provide so many beautiful passes across to the other winger, and I think it will just be a question of how many you can get rather than being the top goal scorer. Because I can't see. I mean, yeah, you've mentioned Dan Rigby. Obviously, he's got many of the players around him, but I think because it's such a strong team, the stats will be very evenly split between all of them. However, I think Dan McClellan's one of the clear standouts in that team. Obviously, you've got John Balding, but when it comes to wingers, he is obviously he's probably the starting winger for Aspire, and I think he will definitely rack up the assists.
Yeah, fantastic picks from both of you. You've actually mentioned a couple of players who were right at the top of my shortlist as well. But for me, I've gone with Ed Common of Teesside. Now, I'll try and explain my reasoning because I've gone back and forth over this quite a few times. To your point, Jane, to your prediction with Dan Rigby, he topped the charts last season with 26 assists, which is an incredible number. That's 26 direct contributions to goals across a 5-weekend season. That says everything you need to know about his consistency and creativity. The reason I've opted for Ed over Dan is Leeds have evolved over the summer. With Ethan Fisher coming in, I think Dan's role changes slightly. I can see him playing higher, drifting wider, and being more of a finisher than a creator in the 25-26 season. I don't expect a dramatic drop, but I do think the numbers will even out a little bit across that team when it comes to creativity. You can look at Brad Bates. He was just behind Dan on 23 assists last season. Many of those, though, were linked connections with Dylan Kelsall. But with Dylan moving on, that dynamic naturally shifts. So Brad will still have a big creative role to play, but those combinations that made him so productive will need time to be rebuilt with the likes of Harry Beswick or Ollie Rock. So that's why I've landed on Ed. He's the constant. He's the player who makes Teesside tick. Everything he does is calculated and controlled. He doesn't rush. He doesn't force things. He just sees things 2 or 3 passes ahead. What gives him the edge this year is the continuity around him. Teesside haven't made a single change since last season. The same squad, the same patterns, the same connections. When you have that kind of stability, those relationships become instinctive. You don't even need to look. Certainly if you're Ed Common, you know where your teammates will be. And you look at the quality of players he's feeding, Mitch Tinkler, Tyler Reeve, and even Greg Baxter, when he pushes forward, they're all natural finishers. And you combine that with Ed's delivery, whether that's from open play or set pieces, you've got a recipe for another huge assist tally. I genuinely think he could surpass 25 this season. If Teesside are going to be right in the title race, it's without question that Ed will be centre to it all and the creative heartbeat of the team. So, yeah, my top assist is Ed Common with honourable mentions to Dan Rigby and Brad Bates, who I think will be right up there in it. Give me your assessment on Ed Common, you two.
I've always said it. I think he's, I'm going to say it now, I think he's the best player that's ever played the game. And I've said it for a very long time. I think there's not one attribute that he lacks in. I think his deception is arguably the best in the world, competing with the likes of Momo Galame, but he's 100% on that level. His passing is to the point. If he could make a pass across the court, land it right on a sixpence. His shooting, his accuracy, his power is something that is unlike anything else. And he is, in my opinion, the most well-rounded player England have ever produced. Yes, you've got other players who've got very strong individual attributes, but he is the most well-rounded player.
I think, technically speaking, I agree with a lot of your assessments. Technically speaking, he's the best player England have ever produced. He does stuff that you can't coach, that you can't teach, that just comes from within. And I spend a lot of time around the England camp and squad, so I get to see them up close. I get to see them in training with one another, and just thinking forward about the future, what a future England team could look like. Let's assume that John, Chris, Ed, and others step away from competing at international level. I think if you look at John, there is an heir, there is a successor in Dan McClellan. If you look at Chris, there is an heir, there is a successor in the likes of Tyler Reeve and Ethan Fisher. With Ed Common, there is no heir, there is no successor, because no one can quite do what he does. To your point, David, the deception, masking his intentions to create space, to create opportunities. It's the most remarkable skill that he has. And if you want an example of that, go back to last season when Teesside played Aspire, and an assist for Mitch Tinkler's eventual goal of the season was one of the most ridiculous moves I've ever seen in the sport. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I think he's magical to watch. He's one of my favourite players in the sport altogether. And that assist that you're talking about was sensational. It's stuff that you can only dream of, really. And I think it's the consistency for me as well. He's performed at this high level for so many seasons that you start to become neutralised to it almost. It becomes normal, you expect it, which is crazy because of the level he performs at is so outstanding that it shouldn't be normal and it shouldn't be this like average thing, but it is because of how good of a player he is.
Yeah, I completely agree. So next up, we have the top goal scorer award. This is always a big one. It's about volume, consistency, and instinct. The players who live in the right areas, who trust their technique, who can turn those half chances into match winning moments. Last season, we saw this race come right down to the wire. We saw such high standards across the division, and I think we're in for something similar again in 25-26. What makes this year especially intriguing, though, is how many teams have restructured their attacking lineups and patterns, new systems, new focal points. And that's where I think we'll see a big change across this season. David, who's your pick for top goal scorer this season? Who do you see as leading the charts?
Again, I've been toying between two this whole time, and I literally, as you were speaking then, I typed down my final answer, and I've gone with Mitch Tinkler, because I think there is so much quality in that Teesside team. You got Tyler Reeve, Greg Baxter, Ed Common, 3 international Euro players that have played for England, but both in the Euros. And I think Mitch, such a great player, such an incredible, got such a great finish on him. I think he's going to be supplied with so many chances this season. And I think it would be very, very, very difficult for him not to be top goal scorer.
Yeah, it's a fantastic pick. I think he got 23 goals in the league last season, so he has a benchmark now on a number to beat, but it's without question that he's going to need to match or better those levels if Teesside are going to be successful in retaining the Premiership trophy. Jay, what about you? Who's your prediction?
Again, similar to David, I'm between 2, and even now I'm still doubting myself which one I should go for, but I'm between Dylan Kelso and Dan McClellan, both been mentioned multiple times throughout this podcast. They're just both sensational players, and I think I am going to go for Dan McClellan purely because of how excited I am for Aspire this season. I think Aspire are going to be right up there challenging, and I think majority of that success is going to come through Dan McClellan. He's got the experience, he knows where to be, and he's always in the right place at the right time. Combine that with his technique and the accuracy he's got, I think he'll be right up there.
Yeah, I mean, I've already highlighted him as my young player of the season. I think he'll hit a different level in the lead up to Argentina. And whether that's in way of creativity or goal scoring, one thing is for certain, he will be right in those conversations. For me, though, I've gone with Dan Rigby from Leeds. Now, we touched on Dan earlier when we talked about top assists, because last season he was the creative heartbeat of that Leeds side. He dictated everything, 26 assists, controlling the rhythm, orchestrating their entire attacking flow. But heading into 25-26, I think we will see that different version of him. The arrival of Ethan Fisher changes Leeds completely. Ethan gives them a natural focal point in the centre. And I think that shift allows Dan to move further forward, to take up more advanced positions and focus on finishing rather than supplying. When you think about it, as the central pivot of Lewis Harris and Ethan Fisher, with players like Dylan Kelsall, Jack Maxwell and Summer Rice stretching the core, I think the service is going to be relentless. And Dan won't need to drop deep as much. I think he'll be free to attack space, get on the end of things and trust his instincts in the final third. And I think that's where we'll see his numbers explode. He's already one of the most intelligent players in the league. He times his rotations perfectly. He's clinical when he's given that sight of goal. The difference now is he's surrounded by players who will do so much of the build-up work for him. So I'm so excited to see Dan Rigby. But there are other contenders. Dylan Kelsall falls into this exact same bracket, a player who will be central to their goal scoring and will be in the mix. Tyler Reeve, Mitch Tinkler, Ed Common, they'll be in the conversation, and Dan McClellan as well, if Aspire give him the freedom to push on. But for me, this feels like the season where Dan Rigby evolves and he will be the ultimate top goal scorer for me.
100% agree with that.
It'd be really intriguing to see Leeds. Obviously, they are the talking point at the moment, and we'll get on to Premiership predictions, maybe our runners-up and our champions. But there's been few times that we've come into a Premiership season with so much intrigue around a particular team and set of players. So excited to see how they get on and how these individuals perform in the conversation of the collective. We know they're sensational performers, but how that gels as a squad, as a team, is a whole matter completely. Let's now progress on to player of the season. This is always one of the toughest categories because it's not just about who scores the goals or sets up the most. It's about influence. It's about the player who defines a campaign, who raises the level of everyone around them and delivers when it matters most. When you look back over the history of the National League, the player of the season almost always comes from a team that is right up there in the title race, because that's where individual brilliance makes the difference between finishing second, finishing first. Jay, who's your pick for player of the season? Who do you think leads the way this year?
I think his name's come up numerous times now, which for me only emphasises his talent. I've gone again for Dan McClellan. I know you, Ryan, had him as your young player. I just think he's got, despite his age, he's got the experience, he's got the talent and the technique to push for the main player of the season. I think I've said it multiple times. I'm really excited for Aspire this season. And I think Dan McClellan again, you don't want to, you can't really say he's going to have a breakthrough season because he's already one of the country's leading players. But I think this season we are all really going to be reminded of the level that he is at and how he's one of the world's best players. So I've had Dan McLaren as my best player.
David, what about yourself?
Again, between two. My honourable mention, second place. A lot of people are going to be shocked by this, but I'm going to go for Dylan Kelsall. The reason why I've gone for Dylan Kelsall as my honourable mention and not my first place choice was because I think Dylan, on paper, he's one of the best players in the league. I just think it's going to take a while to get used to his other teammates, and to win player of the season, you have to be consistent throughout the whole season. You can't really just spike up towards the end of the season. But my first place decision for player of the season, I'm going to have to go with Ed Common. I think he has, again, as we've said, such a brilliance and a thing that that's just intangible. We can't describe what it is. It's just this mannerism where he's just got so much influence on the pitch, and his team in Teesside, they've kept the same squad for the season. They've not made any signings, they've not sold any players, and I think by keeping the same squad together, by keeping the same bunch of players together, it builds that chemistry, it builds that team camaraderie, and I think it will allow him to flourish into the player that we know he was last season, and that we know he has been for the last 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, an incredible player, isn't he? And there is no question that he will be in this conversation come season's end. He absolutely stormed last season's Player of the Year. Absolutely stormed it. I think he won with 85-90% of the vote, which is remarkable when you consider some of the other names in the division. For me, you can make a case for so many players. There is the obvious talents, the Dylan Kelsalls you've mentioned, the Tyler Reeves, the Ed Commons. You could even throw in names like Chris Gordon or Marcus Harrison, who will play such integral roles in their team's identity. For me, every time I go through the list, I always seem to come back on the same two names, and they are John Baldwin and Dan McClellan. Now, let's start with John. I think this season we're going to see a different version of him. Maybe even the most motivated version we've seen in years. After the disappointment of the Ep for Nations Cup and Aspire falling short last season in both the league and the Club World Cup, I think he will be absolutely driven to put things right. John spoke after the Euros about how for the first time in his career, people had publicly questioned his form and inclusion. And knowing him, that'll only fuel the fire. He's not someone who hides from criticism, he uses it. And I think that will translate into performances that really define Aspire's season. He is the standard setter, the heartbeat of Aspire. And when he's in rhythm, the entire team changes. The tempo, the confidence, the belief, everything flows through him. So incredibly excited to see him this season because he's got the bit between his teeth. Then you look at Dan McClellan. I'm convinced at this point Jay has taken my notes because I've just run out of superlatives for him. He's one of the most naturally gifted players I've ever seen in Powerchair football. There are moments where he does things you can't quite process in real time. His awareness, his first touch, the way he manipulates the passing angles, it's all world class. The scary part is, and to your point, Jay, about him having a breakthrough season, how you can't really say that. You can, in the sense that, for me, I don't think we've seen the best of him. Last year, I think he was operating at maybe 60% of what he's capable of. And even then, he was so decisive in the big moments. Now with Rosie Hodgson moving to Villa, Rich George coming in, the picture around him changes. Dan will have that responsibility. and Aspire going to need him to be the one who makes everything click in the final third. And if there's anyone who can handle that responsibility, it's him. We've spoken about the wider context. We're now less than a year away from the 2026 World Cup in Buenos Aires, and the England internationals, in this case, John and Dan, will want to be at their absolute best heading into that. And with the competition for places in that squad being so fierce, it will massively drive the standards domestically. So my players of the season, I could not split between John Bolden and Dan McClellan. But one thing is for certain, that I'm excited for Aspire. If I was to give an honourable mention, it would be to Tyler Eve. I think he will have a real breakthrough year. So good stuff. We are progressing now. Let's move on to the runners-up category. This is always one of the most debated parts of our predictions episodes, because unlike something like top assists or young player of the season, which are largely about individual output, this one forces us to take a step back and look at the bigger picture about who's built a squad that can last the course, who can handle the travel, the intensity, who has the mentality to push right to the final whistle on the final weekend, but ultimately someone who will just fall short. David, who have you got finishing second, trying not to give away who you have finishing first?
Second, I think a lot of people might be very angry with me. I've put Leeds for second. In my opinion, they are on paper the best team in the league, quality wise, individual players. They are unbelievable. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. But I've always said this, and I've said this from the very, very, very beginning when I first started playing for Sale. It doesn't matter if you got the best 4 individuals on the pitch. It matters where you have the best team on the pitch. And that was, if I'm going to bring it back to my own personal experience, that was a big factor when we started deciding the Man United squads, because we wanted to pick not the best 4 individuals, we wanted to pick not the best 6 individuals, the best 6 team. We want to be able to pick a team that will be able to work together, that knows each other, has got a good chemistry, has got a good camaraderie. And I think Leeds, they'll 100% get there. They've got all the qualities to be there. And I think it will just take time. I think they'll 100%, if you look past game week 3 and onwards, they will be the best team in the league. But I think these early 2 or first game weekends will matter a lot. And I think the teams that will have a good connection with their teammates will do well this season.
Very intriguing. Jay, who have you got falling just short?
I've gone for Teesside. And although they are one of my favourite teams in the entire country and entire world, really, I think they play some of the most entertaining and exciting football we can watch. And they've got more than enough to go on and win the title. So I'd be more than happy to be proved wrong by them. But unfortunately for them this season, I do think they are going to fall just short in that second position. And I think that'll be no fault of their own. I'm not saying that they're not going to reach the levels. However, the team I've got in first, I think this season are just going to be unstoppable, in my opinion.
I'm intrigued to see who that is. For me, I think you can make a real case for 3 genuine title contenders. And those title contenders are Leeds, Aspire, and Teesside. With West Brom, I think it's the first time in years I would actually describe them as an underdog. So let me just delve into that a little bit more. West Brom have been the benchmark for nearly a decade, a powerhouse with a winning mentality, a club used to being the hunter rather than the hunted. But this season they're in transition. The departure of Dylan Kelso is absolutely enormous. 22 goals and 13 assists last year. Those numbers are almost impossible to replace. They've brought in the likes of Harry Beswick, who's a player I know really well and I have so much respect for. He's actually the first player I ever met in Powerchair Football back in 2018. It's been incredible to watch his progression. It's a huge move for him, but it's a massive jump in expectation. At Sevenoaks, where I think he scored 6 goals and assisted 2 last season, he's now coming into a team where service, the pace and the pressure are tenfold. So I'm fascinated to see how he adapts, but I hope he thrives. But I just can't ignore the fact that West Brom without Dylan just look different. They'll still win games, of course they will. They're too good not to. But when you lose that kind of talisman, it inevitably shifts your ceiling. So for me, they fall just outside the top 3 conversation, which brings us back to the contenders. I've gone back and forth many times on this. Aspire, Leeds, Teessides. And I'll be honest, even as I say this now, I could still change my mind. But for runners-up, I have landed on Aspire. Now, on paper, you could argue that they're slightly weaker than last season. Rosie Hodgson has moved on. Bobby Williams has retired. Rich George has come in to fill a gap on the wings. And while he has a huge amount of experience, I think it's been 4 or 5 years since he played at this level. So it will take him time to get up to tempo again. But the strength of Aspire isn't just in personnel, it's their chemistry. That core 4 of John Bolden, Dan McClellan, Tom Kelly, John Dixon is one of the most cohesive units in the league. Their understanding of each other's movement, their trust under pressure, and their standards are elite. When they're on the court together, I truly believe they can beat anyone. The challenge this season for them will be volume, because Aspire are competing on 4 fronts: the Premiership, the WFA Cup, now the West Midlands Regional League and the South East Regional League. There's a lot of football for a relatively small squad. So the question isn't whether they're good enough, it's whether they can sustain that level across, 9 months until June, July? If they can, they'll absolutely be in that title race. But if fatigue creeps in, or if they're stretched thin by absentees, I think we'll see the others just edge them. So my runners-up prediction is Aspire, but I'm quietly confident that they'll have a great season. What are our assessments on Aspire?
I've said it throughout the podcast. I'm very much looking forward to watching them this season. Like you said, I think John Bolden's going to be fueled from the, if you want to say, disappointment of last season, despite obviously still playing at a very high level. But for John, the standards that John will hold himself to, he'll want to improve on that for this season. And I think that they will do very well this season. And I agree with you, Ryan. I couldn't decide between the top 3 of Aspire, Teesside and Leeds. I think I've changed it numerous times in the build up to this podcast. And even now I'm looking at it and I'm still not 100% sure, but I'm quite looking forward to Aspire this season.
Let's progress on to the champions now then, Jay. Always one of my favourite parts of the episode, because this is where everything we've talked about, the signings, the form, the balance of the squad all comes together. Who do you have winning the Premiership trophy?
I've got Aspire winning it. I just think that it's their time again, in my opinion. I think John will, like you say, people are, for the first time ever, really, from what I'm aware of, are starting to openly, not maybe doubting, but maybe question whether he is the best for that position in the England squad, with the likes of Tyler Reeve and Fisher. And I think, like you say, John will want to prove them wrong. He'll want to show that he is still one of England's leading players, if not England's leading player. And I think that, combined with Dan McClellan, John Dixon, like you said, will just prove formidable this season. And I think that they'll provide a consistent attacking threat whilst also being solid defensively, that I just don't think anyone will be able to surpass them this season.
No, it's a fantastic prediction. And touches on a lot of the elements that I've used as rationale for why they will finish second in terms of their players, in terms of their cohesion, their togetherness, their talent. They have all of the attributes to go all the way. I'm concerned about the quantity of their squad rather than the quality. What about yourself, David? I can tell now, because we've all selected who would finish runners-up as varied and different, that we're all going to have varied and different predictions for the Premiership champions. So go on to your Premiership pick now, David.
Oh, I've gone for Teesside to win the double for the league again. I think, as I said before, I think the team that you're in and the consistency that you stay in the same squad for a long time really matters. And I think, obviously, they won the league last season. I think they've got a point to prove again. Can they do it again? Can they push themselves to say, yeah, we're the best team, but we were the best team in the league last season. Can we be the best team in the league this season? I think Ed Common wants to again be the best player he can possibly be. Tyler Reeve wants to show to Adam McAvoy saying, yes, I can be a main figure in the middle for England. And I think Greg Baxter is like that anchor in the Teesside team, keeps them stable, keeps them balanced, and I think he provides that security for them. I think Mitch Tinkler this season will be the poacher. I think whatever chances he'll be provided by both Tyler Reeve and Ed Common, he will put away. The reason why I haven't put Aspire there is because although their squad is looking unbelievable this season, I just don't think I think they've changed their squad. They've obviously changed their squad more than Teesside. And I think that continuity might be lost a little bit. I mean, obviously they've still got the same core four, but if they want to make a change in the middle of the game to maybe direct the course of the game or how they want to finish it, it might be a bit difficult. But I definitely think as well, John Bowling's got a point to prove the season, to prove the haters wrong. But hopefully, from Teesside's perspective, they won't let that happen.
A fantastic pick. Before I talk about my champion, I will just talk about who I've got finishing third, because I just want to elaborate on some of your points from earlier, David. So in third, I've got Leeds, and this is one that, as you said, for second, no doubt for third, will surprise a few people. And it's crazy that statement in itself, that is controversial or may surprise people when we're talking about Leeds having anything other than that Premiership trophy come season's end. Last season, they laid some incredible foundations. The chemistry, particularly between Dan Rigby and Lewis Harris, came to life in such an exciting way. And Jack Maxwell was prolific. They come flying out the blocks in game weeks 1 and 2, playing with freedom, intensity, confidence. But then over the course of the campaign, they just faltered slightly. And I don't say that as a criticism. It was never really about falling short. It was about learning how to compete over the full Premiership season. Because in truth, I don't think the 24-25 campaign was ever one where the title was an expectation for them. It was more maybe a dream, an early glimpse of what this group could become. And that's the exciting part, because the team that ended last season was already good enough to be in title conversations. But then you add to England's senior internationals in Dylan Kelso and Ethan Fisher, and suddenly, for a lot of people, Leeds are catapulted to title favourites. On paper, by individual ability alone, I don't think there's a squad in the division that matches them. I'll say that with complete confidence. I'll pass to you two in a second. Technically, they're outstanding. Dylan's precision and power, Ethan's strength and creativity, Dan's tactical brain, Lewis's organisation at the back. You put it all together and you've got a team that could compete on any front in any competition. But to your point, David, there's a very big difference between individual talent and team cohesion, because individual brilliance and collective chemistry are often the difference between winning and falling short. When you think about those four names, particularly, to do none of their other players a disservice, in Lewis, Dan, Dylan, and Ethan, you're talking about four strong players, but all equally strong personalities. Four players who think about the game in different ways. That's not a negative. It's what has made them elite. But it also means there is going to be a real process of aligning them, of figuring out the combination on and off the court, something that will really help them click. And that's why, for me, this prediction isn't about doubting their quality. It's about giving them a grace period they need to establish that chemistry. Because technically, Leeds will outplay almost everyone they come up against. Their movement, their tempo, their speed and transitions, I think it will overwhelm a lot of sides. But psychologically, that's where they'll be tested. The pressure is on them like never before, because this season, there is nowhere to hide. If they draw a game, people will question them. If they lose, no matter who it's against, people will question them. If they win but don't dominate, people will still question them. And that's a different kind of pressure altogether, the pressure of expectation of being a title favourite. And that's where their mental resilience will need to be as sharp as their technical quality. They'll need to be absolutely impenetrable in terms of mindset. And that will come, I've got no doubt about it, but I think it will take time. So for 25-26, I've got Leeds finishing third, not because they're not good enough, far from it, but because this feels like their bedding in year, a season to let those combinations settle, to find the rhythm and the understanding. Give them that time, let them find their identity. And I genuinely think from 26-27 onwards, we could be looking at the next true powerhouse of Powerchair football. What do you boys think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think I would love for Leeds to go and win this Premiership. I really like the look of that Leeds squad, and I like some of the individual players personally. But like you say, I think with so many big names and big personalities, with your Ethan Fishers and your Lewis Harrises and all the and the Dylan Kelsels, they're such key individuals that will want to not necessarily be in the spotlight, but they're so used to being in that spotlight that I think it might take them maybe not a whole season, but a few weekends to properly gel and properly form that team spirit. And I think that, like you say, after this season, they could really be that dominant side that we see so consistently throughout the next few years in the Premiership.
Yeah, I 100% agree as well. I think the quality of players is unmatched in any other team, even Teesside, who I've predicted to win the league. I just think, again, as I've said, individual quality of players, they've got the best squad. On a piece of paper, if you put the three teams next to each other, Aspire, Teesside and Leeds is the best on paper. However, camaraderie and team spirit count for a lot, and I think that will come, whether that be this season, next season, whenever. But I'm pretty sure it will come, and I think, as you said, Ryan, they will be powerhouses.
It's exciting times ahead, but I'm sure they will be wanting to prove us wrong and show that they don't need that bedding in year, that grace period to establish themselves and find that team chemistry. And that's what makes the narrative around this division so intriguing. Apologies for the deviation. I will now go on to my champions because I didn't want to disregard them in this context. Like you, David, there's only one for me, Teesside. Now, we've spoken about stability, chemistry, and they have that in abundance. They are the embodiment of that. They've had no transfers in or out. The same core that lifted the title last season are back again with a shared purpose, clear roles, a collective hunger that only grows stronger with their success. And that kind of continuity is incredibly rare in Powerchair football. Most clubs go through some sort of change over the summer, whether that's a new coach, a tactical tweak, a shift in players. But with Teesside, they've doubled down on what works. And when you've got a side that already operates at such a high level of understanding, that cohesion becomes their biggest weapon. Just to touch again on the individuals that we've referenced across this episode, Ed Common, one of the most gifted creative players the sports has ever produced. His range of passing, his intelligence, ability to dictate tempo, it's outrageous. Mitch Tinkler, last season's Young Player of the Season, someone who continues to evolve every game. His work rate, his composure and consistency are what make him such a good player. This year, I want to see him go up another level, not just for Teesside's sake, but because I genuinely think he's right on the fringe of that England senior level. I think he's that good. Tyler Reeve, he was my honourable mention in the player of the season. What can you even say about him? He's one of those players who just changes the feel of a match. There's a calmness to him that very few players have. And I think in 25-26, we'll see him establish himself as one of the best central players in the division. If that happens, it could be transformative for England as much as Teesside. He's got the attributes to fill that deep-lying playmaker role that we've traditionally seen from the likes of John Baldwin or Chris Gordon at international level. And with Buenos Aires around the corner, I think this is a season where he really cements himself as a key piece of that England puzzle that we know that will need a shift up and a change following the disappointment of Italy. You add players, Dylan Pearson, Alasdair Hay, Greg Baxter, provide incredible balance and characters. That's the thing that excites me most about this side, though. It's the togetherness, the different ways that they can win. They can dominate possession and suffocate teams. They can absorb pressure and hit you with devastating counters. They're organised. They're mentally resilient, and they've developed themselves into an absolute ruthless outfit. And you combine all of that, and Teesside are my pick for the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. What do we think?
100% agree, I think. Obviously, I've agreed with you on the same opinion. I just think the quality of Ed Common, Tyler Reeve is unmatched by any team in the league. I mean, obviously, you could say Ethan Fisher, Lewis Harris, but nothing really comes close to that bond, because Ethan Fisher and Lewis Harris, although they are two very good individual players, they've not, as far as I'm aware, they've not trained together as much as Ed Common, Tyler Reeve. Ed Common and Tyler Reeve both being England senior players, they would have obviously had Teesside training as well as England training alongside that. However, but Lewis Harris and Ethan Fisher, although Ethan Fisher's an international player, Lewis Harris is still knocking on the door of that England first team. So obviously they don't train together quite as much, but I think it's just going to be a very interesting. It's almost the battle of the duos. Who's going to be the most formidable?
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, that all but concludes our predictions for the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. I said if time allowed, we would go through our final table predictions. I think we'll do that. So we'll start with you, Jay. Go from 12th to 1st, state in the team, and just a sentence or two rationale behind your pick.
I'd just like to preface before I say all these, I would be more than happy to be proved wrong by any of these teams. And I think
say this every time.
Yeah, I think that, for example, my bottom three, I've changed it multiple times. I think you could have it any way around, and that can apply really to different sections of the table. But to start off with, in bottom place, unfortunately, I have got Muscle Warriors, and I just think that they're just getting promoted from the championship, and despite them winning that championship last season, I do think they are going to struggle this season, and I think I think it'll be good for them to build some experience, build some character amongst the squad, But yeah, I think they might just fall a bit short this season. Above them, I've got West Bromwich Albion Throstles. I think same as last season, they're not really going to reach the levels they want to. And I think that last season winning that playoff spot, and don't get me wrong, it was a comfortable, almost disciplined win over Teesside Steel in that playoff position. But I think this season, the level of the Premiership has just took that step up, and I think they will come down. Above them in that playoff spot, I have got Middlesbrough. I think the players, like the talent such as Umar Hanif, will be just enough to keep them out of that instant relegation. And I think they will just be placed in that playoff position. But I'd be more than happy to be proved wrong again. And then just above them, bit of a surprise, I've gone for GBG Knights. I think they will stay up almost not comfortably, but away from any dangerous positions. I think they've got more than enough talent. Obviously, the signing of Ben Keat, the international signing, if nothing else, will bring experience from the big stages, like the international stages. And I think that combined with the talent they already have and the goal scoring threat I was made aware of last season as a goalkeeper, I think it'll be just enough to keep them safe. Then moving on to mid-table-ish, I've gone for Sevenoaks. I think losing Harry Bestwick might prove a bit problematic and maybe prevent them from progressing further up the table as they would wish to. However, I don't think they'll be in any danger of going down. And then just above them is a bit of a surprise, and I think some people might disagree. I have gone for Newcastle, and as much as I think Ollie Crawshaw can fill that void of Ethan Fisher, I think it might take him a season or two to get up to the levels and the confidence of being that out and out. Well, I'm not sure if he's going to play middle, but the out and out main player in that team. So I don't think they'll be battling near the top this season, unfortunately. Then above them, I have gone for Greenbank. I mentioned earlier how excited I am for this season. With the likes of Jacob Butch-Platt, Marcus Harrison, Toby and Krob from Denmark, I think they'll do really, really well this season and prove quite a lot of people wrong, getting quite high up in the table. Above them, moving to the higher part of the table now, I have gone for Villa Rockets. Obviously, signing Rosie Hodgson from Aspire brings that experience at the very top level. Also, Kieran Burns adds to the squad depth, allows for rotation, and I think they'll be quite a formidable side this season. Also, very defensively solid, so I think that will help massively. And then, similar to you, Ryan, I've got West Brom Albion in fourth. I think that losing, like you said, losing Dylan Kelsey is such a big loss, and I know they've tried to fill that void with Harry Bestwick, and no disrespect to him, but it's such a big void to fill, and I think there's not many players worldwide that could fill that spot, only a select few, so I think it might take them a season or two to rebuild and get back up there. And then I've gone for Leeds in third. As mentioned earlier, I think it might take them a season or two just to combine together and glue properly to battle for that top spot. And then Teesside and then Aspire for the first place, as mentioned earlier.
Yeah, a fantastic summary, and not a great deal of variations from my own list, certainly when you're referencing maybe the top 4 or 5. David, run me through your final table prediction.
So my table prediction. So in 12th, I've gone with West Brom Throstles. It might surprise quite a few people, but I think every other team around them has improved, and I know they've got prior and many years of Premiership experience before, but I think they've not really improved on many areas. Yes, they've signed Thomas Donacher from Norwich, but I just don't think they'll be able to compete with the other teams just because how good they are. Not on a reference on the quality of West Brom Throstles, but it's more of a quality on how good the other teams are. In 11th, I put Mossa Warriors. I think they've obviously made a lot of signings in Sean Donacher, Henry Barnett, and Dakota Hannum, but I think they lack that Premiership experience. Yes, Rickenshaw and Hannah Hingley have had many, many years in the Premiership competing for their respective sides, but I think it will be very, very difficult for them to stay up due to that lacking squad depth almost. I mean, it's a very new squad. It's going to take a quite while to gel with obviously Dakota Hannum, Sean Donahoe, and Henry Barnard, all trying to obviously get into the squad, and they just need to gel at some point and find that chemistry. And but I think it might be a very tough season for them. In 10th in the playoff spot, I've put Borough there. Although they've survived the first season in the Premiership, I think they will. They've not improved. They've not really signed anyone to push them higher up the league and to push further forward. I think they're too good to get relegated, as they've had that prior Premiership experience. But I don't think they're completely good enough to completely survive the relegation threat. In 9th, I've then got GBG Knights. I think it'll be very close between GBG Knights and Middlesbrough. But the only reason I think GBG Knights were shit, firstly because they're signing on Ben Keats, a person who's played in the Club World Cup at a very high standard. But I think GBG Knights, they also have that goal scoring threat, and I think as a team whose aim is to survive, I think being able to have that odd goal in your locker when you need the big moments when you need them, and obviously having players such as Oscar Smedley and Kai Shaw and George Holloway, the top goal scorer last season, I think it will really help them in their survival push. In 8th, I've gone with Sevenoaks. Obviously suffered a huge loss with Harry Bestwick to West Brom. However, I think the re-signing of, or the end of the loan spell from George Shippey and Stanley Ball will 100% benefit them. Obviously, having that prior Championship experience and winning the league, they'll be able to take that into the Premiership and hopefully add goals and assists and help Sevenoaks thrive in the league. Then in 7th, I've gone with Villa. Made a lot of signings this summer. Obviously, one person I've known very well, Kieran Burns, they've signed for Villa. And I think he could benefit them quite a lot. Also with Rosie Hodgson, who could be a massive goal threat, obviously been at Aspire for many years. And I think she'll add a lot to that squad. However, I don't think they'll do as well as many people are expecting due to the missing of Bobby Allen this season. In 6th, I've got Newcastle United. I think Ollie Crawshaw will play a huge role with them this season. So will Kieran Steer and Sam McKee. Obviously, Kieran Steer playing at international level for Scotland was really the beating heart of that Scotland team. And I thought he'll be able to add a lot to Newcastle. Obviously, Ollie Crawshaw talks about him a lot already. I think he'll just shine this season. However, I think it's going to be a change period. I think they've got to be able to adapt and obviously new teammates, new time to gel. And it's just that break-in period where they just need a bit of time to get used to each other. In 5th, I've got Greenbank. I think they'll build on the base from last season. Marcus Harrison, obviously the clear standout player, England level, one of the main England players for many, many years, top player in the division for literally more than a decade. Jacob Buck-Platt, he's almost protege. He will be able to break out the season, add more to the squad, be able to showcase what he really can do and show us why he deserves to be a main person in that Greenbank squad. In 4th, I've gone with Jay's opinion here. I've gone with West Bromwich Albion. I think obviously it's a transition period for them. Obviously losing Bill and Castle is huge, and I still, to be honest, don't think they've really recovered from that loss of Marcus Harrison from their squad. And I think of signing Harry Bestwick, really good signing, of course, but I think it would be a huge, huge ask for him to fill that Dylan Kelso pivotal role that he had. Obviously, 3rd, I've got Aspire. I think John Bowling will be a very, very good performer this season. I think he's got a point to prove the haters wrong, and show why he deserves still that recognition to be a starting England player. I think Dan McLennan as well be at the top of basically every numbers list this season. Top assists, top goal scorer. I think he'll provide a really important role for Aspire this season. Leeds in second. On paper, as I've said, best individual squad of individuals. But team unity, I don't think they'll quite have it yet, but I definitely think they'll have it in the future when they find that team chemistry. And finally, in first, I have Teesside. I elaborated on this earlier, but I think Ed Common and Tyler Ebe are going to show a different beast that they have never shown before.
Yeah, again, a fantastic assessment. I'll go through mine quickly. I'll try not to repeat your assessments because a lot of our picks are similar. In 12th, I've got Muscle Warriors. I think it's going to be a tough ask for them to maintain Premiership survival. Not because I don't think they're good enough. I just think the talent in the division as a whole is absolutely stacked. And if you're assessing their first 6 games in the division, I don't know where they get points. In their first weekend alone, they play Aspire, Leeds, West Brom and Newcastle. Extending that to game week 2 with Villa and Greenbank, I don't see them picking up points this side of the new year. And momentum counts for a lot in this division. So I'm happy to be proved wrong. It will all come down to how quickly those new signings bed in, and intrigued to see how they do. I think they'll enjoy the experience because I don't think it's unfair to say that they exceeded expectations in last season's championship. In 11th, I've got GBG Knights. As is always the case in any form of football, in any form of sport, when there's promotion and relegation, you tend to look to the promoted sides to be the favourite to be relegated. And that has been my line of thought for this one. GBG Knights have talent, have ability. Do they have what it takes across 22 league games to stave off relegation? I don't think so. I think the teams that I've got around them in that bottom pack, I think just have a little bit more know-how and experience when the going gets tough. But they could easily finish mid-table and it wouldn't shock me. In 10th, I've got Middlesbrough. I think they will be drawn into that playoff fixture again, but I think for 2 consecutive seasons, they will secure Premiership survival. I think the core of their squad, when you're considering players like James Found, Umar Hanif, you've got really exciting players. They've added Ethan Galloway for an additional season. They're bringing back Thomas Pettigrew. Add that to Carl Forster off the back of a very promising Euros with Northern Ireland. I think they'll have a good season, and they showed last campaign that they're incredibly tough to break down. So it's turning that defensive stability into attacking output and success. In 9th, I've got Sevenoaks. I like both of you. I've looked at that Harry Beswick departure and considered it within the wider context, how it will affect attacking rhythm and wider play. I like George Shippey. I like Stanley Ball. I think they're sensational players. The question is how quickly they can get up to the pace of the Premiership, because they've never competed at this level before. If that is quicker than I suspect it to be, there's no reason why they can't go on a real run, but I have them finishing 9th. Unlike you two, I've got West Bromwich Albion Thrussels finishing comfortably middle of the pack. I think last season was a freak year for them, that it didn't just gel. It didn't quite click under the leadership of Colin Gordon. I think they've had a switch up tactically. I think they've had a switch up when it comes to coaching setup and assessing their players. I think they have more than enough to maintain survival in this division. In 7th, I've got Villa Rockets. The question isn't about talent with Villa. It's about how those personalities gel together, because I don't think it's unfair to say that when you mix Kieran Burns, David Lewis, Rosie Hodgson, they are some strong characters. And I want to see them almost face a little bit adversity. I want to see what it's like when the going gets tough, when things don't go their way. Because if they are together, if they are one, they're united, that will encourage me a great deal for the season as a whole. So that is my question mark around Villa. In sixth, I've got Newcastle United Foundation, Ollie Crawshaw, big year for him, but the expectations are very different. And I think they know that. They won't be in a title race. They probably won't go to the latter stages of the cup, but they can go back to developing the individual players and just quietly going about their business. So I've got them finishing smack bang in the middle. In fifth, I've got Greenbank. I think they have the potential to challenge the teams above them. But it's all about, have they put what they learned from 24-25 to practice? Will we see Jacob Bookplatt come and reach another level? Will we see Marcus Harrison have a inspirational season? We will see. In fourth, West Brom, as we've mentioned, the departure of Dylan Kelsall in itself would be enough to take any team from title favourite to title contender, and maybe even lower than that. Leeds in third, to all of my points above. It's about giving them a year's grace period to establish the chemistry and the tactics, but when that clicks, they will almost certainly be top of my pick for next year. Aspire in second because of the squad depth, and top Teesside because I think they are the benchmark, and whether you look at that on an individual basis or a collective basis, I think they are the team to beat. We all okay with them predictions?
100%.
Yeah, 100% agree with most of them. I think with us, me and David both had West Brom Potatoes quite low down compared to you. I do think that if everything does go well for them and if everything does click, they could be more than safe in this league. But I just think this season they are going to struggle again. But I'm more than happy for them to stay up.
Oh, that just adds to the intrigue of it all. And that wraps up our Premiership predictions for the 25-26 Slater and Gordon National League. A massive thank you to my guests, David D and Jay Pickston, for your insights. And as always, a huge thank you to MK Battery, who power this podcast and every WFA broadcast, and to Slater and Gordon, title sponsors of the National League, whose support continues to elevate the sport every single season. The Premiership kicks off on October 25th at the Lee Westwood Sports Centre, and every match will be streamed live on the WFA's YouTube. So until then, thank you to all that have listened. We'll be back very soon, no doubt, with another episode. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much for having me.